It's clear with me whilst we've set up the live stream. I'll just move my helmet. There you go. And then in a few minutes, we'll start this live stream. Today, it's going to be about peasant weapons of the Viking Age. Yeah, we've all seen swords and big axes and Dane axes, but what did the actual peasant, the common folk of the land, actually have? Because if he could not afford a sea axe, if he could not afford a lance axe, or a decent axe or sword, then what did you have to use? That is what I'll be answering in this video today. So just bear with me whilst we set up this live stream. I just got to find it on the old camera, and then when we've got a few people watching, we can start. And yeah, I'm in some Viking kit today for a change. Let's get my swords hammers out. Show you that I am indeed a Norse Viking. And we'll find the live stream. This is going to be very exciting, I think. So here we are. And of course, there's another live stream in the vertical position. We can just turn this down. Bear with me. We have a look at the position on the camera. That's not too bad. Perhaps we've got 3 people watching. That's great. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say thank you for the last couple of days' worth of videos you've watched. We're just about reaching 14,000 views the last 2 days, which is spectacular. And let's talk about what's been published today. Now, today, I think one of the best videos we've made for a while is another Dave the Cat video. It's a long format video, only 4 minutes. It'll take 4 minutes of your life. And if you really wanted to not spend 4 minutes, you could double up the speed, because you can do that in your options on your phone and on your TV or games console. And you can watch it in 2 minutes. But please do go and watch that video. And then today I decided to make a couple of trending videos about trending news things that's happening in the world. So one of them is about the volcano in Indonesia. And I know it's a bit of a comical video I made, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the fact that there's people being hurt and injured. I did say at the end, take care. And we're all going to try to get that message across, but it is a trending thing, and I thought it was quite funny that I could have a filter of a volcano and have Eggle popping out of it. And I'm sure if Eggle was around today, he would really love that. And then the other trending video I did was about the cloud seeding and the terrible storms they've had in Dubai. And again, I found another filter which I've seen a while ago on CapCut of like a guy. You can put a guy next to a coastline. So I put Eggle there, and so do check them out later on after this live stream. And then we had a very funny video coming out at 7 o'clock where a woman is taking a camera picture of knickers, but she shows a picture of Dave the cat. And I thought it was quite ironic, being he's a pussycat. But that's enough of what we've been doing today. And I thought I'll end this day with a live stream. So this is what we're doing. So peasant weapons. I mean, it's a fascinating and wonderful subject. And I've got an arrangement of weapons, as you can see on the table. In fact, you can't see all the weapons because some of them go off the table. But what would the average peasant have? The average farmer, the average guy or woman. Women fighting is quite controversial in the world of the Dark Age and early medieval history, but no doubt some of them would have fought. And let's face it, I mean, you've got lots of instances in World War I and lots of instances in the American Civil War of women dressing as men to get away with the fact that they could go and fight in the war. And they did this to extremes. In fact, there's a very famous case of a woman doctor who fought in the American Civil War, and she even had a fake beard. So that's the extremities of what she went to. So let's go and look at the chat. Well, that's another sideline for the other day. But what would the peasant have? So I think the first thing we're going to look at is clubs, because a lot of people, a lot of long houses, if you was a woodworker, or just wanted the club itself for doing jobs around the house, whether you're carving a bit of wood, whether you're knocking out your chicken to slaughter it. A club is a very useful thing, and this is a wooden club. And I think if I get my tape measure out, I can find it, but we'll measure a few of these things as well, so you've got an idea of how big some of these items are. So clubs are ideal. In fact, this club is kind of designed of this old club. This old club is about 30 years old. I've had for years, and I've recently just got along and got my wood horse out, which is a wood shaving horse. You sit on like a little bench, In fact, they're going to make one. I may demonstrate that, and I'm trying to improve it a little bit. So I work the top of the handle, and I've also worked this bit. So this is kind of the pre-club to this club, and then one day I wanted a larger club, so I got myself a nice bit of ash, and it's been sitting in a workshop drying, and I just got my axe out, and I made this club. And of course, it's great for doing jobs. I sometimes use it for wood carving if I've got to use a chisel, because that's ideal for that. And it's, like I said, it's great for doing so many jobs around the house, on your long house. You could knock posts in with it. You could, knock out your mate when he's been a bit loud. Oi, mate! So yeah, clubs are fascinating. And of course, you can read in the Viking sagas where a warrior has gone to battle without any weapons, but somehow he's managed to go and chop a tree down. So he's got an axe. So he does have an axe. Do we have an axe? Probably, yes. There's a Francisca. His axe, and somehow chopped a branch down and made a club. And I can remember reading a few of the sagas and having that kind of a story mentioned in the sagas. So we definitely know they had clubs. But of course, these sort of things, unless they end up in bogs or special sort of soil which would keep the remains of wooden items, they generally rot away and you don't find them. You may find the evidence of the imprint in the ground, because it'll be flattened over time with the weight of the soil. So a lot of these items from the Viking Age don't survive, and it's a shame. And of course, you may have to go into battle with 2 clubs, but then you would be going clubbing. And of course, you could have something very much like a hammer, because wooden hammers and mallets are such a very old thing as well. And of course, this one has been turned on a lathe, and it has 3 lines of decoration just to make it look nice. And also, the central line is a guide for where the guy's got to drill it. And then he also knows when he drills through that he's also got the line on the outside to guide him. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to put a handle on a hammer and have it wonky at an angle. So, and that will take time to turn. Of course, this was a very old hammer, which has been used and abused over years, not by me, but by other people. And again, it's great for knocking in tent pegs, because tent pegs are a thing they had, wooden tent pegs. And if you was wealthy, you could have iron tent pegs, but God knows why you want an iron tent peg. You can turn it into a nice axe, or even a sea axe or sax to the Vikings. So that's also a fascinating aspect about it. And of course, somewhere in the house, oh, wait a minute, I can show you it. I've got a much larger mallet. Let's grab this up. I do apologise, I'll be standing in front of the camera. No, that's not it. It's a big axe. Somewhere in this house, I've got a really big mallet. Oh, no, I've found it. So bear with me. So, of course, you could have the daddy of mallets and go with something like this into battle. But let's face it, would you be stabbed by a knife or have your brain smashed in with something like this? I think I prefer to be stabbed by a knife or be shot by a bullet than having my brain smashed in with a big mallet. But of course, these sorts of items were readily available in your longhouse because you needed them to do jobs. Whether to go and mend some fences, or you may use it to split logs if you've got a wedge, or if you're splitting logs with an axe, you may want to have something to knock your axe in. So again, and that is, that's ash. It's all ash. This was turned years ago, but over time it split. So at some point I got to make a new one of these, and so I've got some nice ash in my garage, and we're going to turn it on a lathe. And yeah, I've used this a lot over the years on camp, so that's why it's so battered. But it is a very nice example of a great big mallet, because we often forget about such things. And again, you'd have them in your longhouse. But then you may go up the scale and have a larger club, like this. Again, it's quite lethal. You could actually use it. There are a few different methods. So if you get your shield, you could of course use it and attack over. This is a little bit heavy, this mallet, and I've got tennis elbow. But of course, you could also use it like this as another method of using it. But let's face it, if that comes into your face and bashes your face, you're going to have a broken nose and you're going to suffer because of it. So yes, also another fascinating tool. This is the second one I made. I've got a much smaller one. It's a bit lighter, but generally in Viking reenactments, you wouldn't be allowed to use this. Maybe if you're in a small group and you want to display using such an item, then it could be used by two warriors who know what they're doing and are used to each other. But again, rather lethal. And of course, this would have been a root ball, and then I, over time, put it on my wood horse. I shaved down the handle, and then with an axe, I've gone along and I worked it with an axe on a stump to get this kind of effect. And let's face it, that's pretty lethal. If you get smacked on the side of the head with one of them, it's going to crack your skull and you're going down. So, of course, that's another option. Now, most men who were free men would have had a sea axe of some sort. So you would have been carrying a sea axe on your boat or hanging down this way or vertically. So you would have had one of these, most probably. But it does make you think whether slaves who had no right or freedom to have a knife, whether they was made to fight in battle. Most probably so. But yes. So that's a knife. Now let's just look at some of your comments, and then we'll carry on talking about some of these weapons on my table. So we've got a comment here from Rep. So do kids still learn about Saxons, you reckon? Well, yes, they do. They do learn about Saxons for GCSE English, and then they kind of miss out the Vikings for some reason. I don't know why that is these days. And then they go straight into the Battle of Hastings and the Anglo-Normans and the Saxons and King Harold and the Godwinsons, and they talk about stuff like Henry Ward, you know, the guy who was going around the marshes attacking the Normans post 1066, and they talk about how the Normans went up north and they harried the north and they took over the land of the north in literally 2 years. When you think about it, that's quite an amazing feat. So they talk about sort of things like that, but like I said, they completely ignore and don't really mention Viking history these days. And they do get things wrong, because I got some GCSE history books and they get things wrong. They describe things wrong. So they're not completely up to key, and they are teaching kids the wrong thing fundamentally and not the correct thing. And I can give you one example of this when they talk about people that make coins, and they'll say, oh, it's a coin stamper, but that's the wrong term. It's more of a modern interpretation. But coin stamping is just a part of the process of making a coin. You know, first of all, you've got to get your silver sheets, you've got to make it. So it may have an ingot, you may be flattening ingots, you may be buying the sheet silver in sheet form. Of course, in modern interpretations, we don't often use silver for coin because that costs a lot of money. So we mostly use pewter. So again, in the same method, you've got to get sheet pewter. You've got to have a round stamp them out, unless you're going to draw around the coin and actually cut them out with a pair of tin snips, which they did have. So it's a long process. You then got to make the coin die. Now, often the coin die will come in two parts and would be made by a blacksmith, but the blacksmith may not fundamentally put the design in. That is sometimes the responsibility of the coin, you know, the moneyer, as we will call it in reenactment and in proper history. So, yes, they don't talk about it enough. So we've got a comment here from Critch Ali, says, very interesting. Well, thank you very much. And I do hope you do find these live streams interesting. And it's also a great way for us on the channel to talk about history and show you a few of these lovely items we have. We've got a comment here from the Viking, Martin Brown. I like chocolate mint. Oh, why not? And the Viking also says, Martin Brown, or a very long pointy stick. Well, of course, you could have spears. It's the next option if you were poor enough, but most people had spears in the house, and there's not an awful lot of metal in a spear. This is a javelin compared to a spear, and you know, ideally you'd be carrying a couple of javelins, and maybe you may be carrying a much larger spear. And just before the battle commences, where the two shield walls meet each other, you're trying to get one of these, and you'll be throwing it into your enemy, and hopefully not hitting the shield wall and actually going above the shield wall and landing somebody's head or chest and taking somebody out, because a load of these flying and taking out a load of people could really win you the battle, because if you, especially if you're outnumbered. So that's another option for the battlefield, is the spear. And we have two sorts here. We have what you call a leaf spring, or kind of a leaf shape, not a leaf spring, a leaf shaped spear. And then we have a kind of a pointed one, which is more ideal for going through mail. And at some point when I make a target, these are made by a blacksmith and they're really nice. And the actual wooden shafts of these are actually wooden shafts from windbreaks, because that's the only shaft I had at the time. So the old windbreaks you'll take on the beach, that's where I got these shafts from. Yes, so that's another option. Of course, another option is you could have a hammer, because if you're a smithy, most farmstead would have a smithy within that farmstead. Now, some men would have the ability to make things, but a lot of blacksmiths travel from one farm to another. They go and make things for the farmer, and then the farmer's got what he wants out of the blacksmith. He goes on to the next farm and gets a load of silver coin, and then again and again and again. But of course, in villages over time, blacksmith developed, and then it would have been passed down from generation to generation. And that's a very old blacksmithing hammer from many years ago. So you may have one of these. And I'm sure you agree, being smacked in the head, the side or the front, that will do a lot of damage and you'll be going down. So that's another option, because you'd use whatever you had at hand. Now, most people and most farms had an axe. So an axe is another really great tool for taking onto the battlefield, because there were so many axes about. I think spears are the most common, followed by sea axes and then probably axes. And the most rarest thing you'll find is swords. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But of course, you'd be felling your trees. You had to have wood all the time for your fire. So you needed an axe to do that. And most farmsteads will probably have more than one axes. Of course, I've got two here. This is more of a bearded axe because it's got a bit of a hanging down bit. And it's great for hooking onto a shield. And then you could pull the shield of the man in front of you, and then the guy with a spear will come in and stab in the chest, and that's another guy that's out of the battle. So, yes. So, let me look at some of your comments. So, and the Martin Brown says, that's my normal curry, 2 blunt javelins and a long blunt spear. Well, these ones are sharp, these spears. So you wouldn't be able to take that into a battle reenactment. But if you wanted to display a spear, then these are great. And they were very cheap. They were only about £8 or £9 each, these, of eBay. And they're very well made. And then this one is a reenactment spear because it's blunt. And the reason why we have a little knob at the end is so that when you're actually fighting somebody, you're not going to end up stabbing them. But what you do end up with, if you're not wearing mail or a gambesson or a leather jerkin, you end up with little round bruises from the times when you've been hit with a spear. And depending on the person using it, it also depends on how bad the bruise is. But most people learn the ability not to do it too hard. And you're trying to take a person out within a certain range and area of the body, which will be, you don't hit below the arm, you don't hit above the head, you don't hit around the private parts, you completely try to avoid the spine, and you don't really go below the knees. So that's your hit areas in Viking reenactment combat. So, yes. So let's have a look what else we got. Of course, another sort of axe you may have around the house if you're working on wood, and again you would have, is a T-shaped axe. Now, this one is an Indian-made one. It's getting loose now, so at some point I'm going to make a new handle for this. And I think somebody in the comments was saying, oh, you should make a 3 or 4 foot handle for one of these weapons and tools. It's a tool first. It's very sharp, actually. And I must say, it's a lovely design, and it's been really well made. And they do make some fantastic kit in India, and it's super, super sharp. And then, if we're lucky, we have another one here. And this one is a Anglo-Saxon T-shaped axe. So you can compare the two. I mean, which of those two would you take into battle? Again, this is a sharp one, but not so sharp because I've not sharpened it myself. And this is based on the Kryak horde and was made by a guy in Sheffield who's on Etsy, Dayguard, I think his name is, and they make some really nice stuff. And it's been really nicely heat treated because it does have a bit of a sound to it. And I've tested it chopping some logs, and it does work, but it's not so sharp. I need to sharpen it at some point. So you may have one of these. Of course, we use these to make planks. You go along the side. This is often why you find the handle isn't straight. It's got a slight curve on it. So when you're working the axe, you're not going to bang your hand on the plank itself. Because if you're left or right-handed, not that they had left-handed people, but if you're a Saxon or a Viking and you preferred to work with your left hand, which no doubt would have happened, you'd have the taper going the other way. It would taper off this way. So this is fine for me because I'm right-handed in the modern world, and it'll be great for making planks to make a chest or for a table because you needed such things. But of course, if you don't have a Langsax or you lost your Sayax, then this may be the tool you have to go into battle with. And if you're lucky, you've got a shield. This is quite essential. So that's some of them. Here we have something rather strange. I don't know why I made it. It's a large ladle. It was for working a large cauldron of stew. But again, this may be the only thing you've got at hand. So you may go into battle with something like this. If you're very, very poor and you can't afford a sea axe or you don't have an axe. I mean, I'm wealthy, so I got swords, and we'll talk about that later on. And of course, that's made of ash. It's just designed for a purpose. I suppose you could also use it as a paddle on a conical boat because conical little ships were quite popular back in the day. And that's basically a round vessel, which is made of willow. So it's got a willow frame, and then they'll get a large piece of leather, and then they'll tie the leather around it and then daub it in with tar because that was available. And then it makes it waterproof, and you could travel down the river. It's not so easy to travel on a conical, but you need one paddle, and then you paddle either at the back or the front. I forget now. I went in one once, and it capsized, and I got wet. So that's another option. Of course, another peasant's weapon that's been around since the Roman times, and this is a modern interpretation. At some point, I've got to go and find myself a authentic Anglo-Saxon copy, because I do believe there are some around. But this is a hedge cutter for going along and cutting your hedges and sorting your hedges out. But again, this is actually a military one from World War II, actually, because it's got the military mark on it. And again, you may just have one of these around the house. You're going to use what you're going to use and what's available, because let's face it, if you're going to battle, you don't have a sea axe, you don't have an axe, then you got this, then you're going to take this into battle. And again, it's razor sharp. It does need sorting out because it's been used so much in my garden over the years for chopping down trees and all sorts, and fairly good for dealing with roots. And it does need a new handle because it's a bit loose, to be fair. But again, this may be the thing you have around your longhouse. I mean, you may choose to go into battle with a small sea axe. This is generally one I would use for cutting meats and eating my dinner with. And it's not the biggest of knives, but you may be lucky enough and have a much larger sea axe. So that's two options. Of course, if you've got any questions, please let me know. And if we're in my chaotic table of weapons, because we've got two examples of say axes there, and I made both of them years ago. Because they've got antler. Of course, antler is another weapon you could use, but let's face it, if your knife broke in battle, which it could do if it's poor fighting, then you may only have a bit of antler. But you stab that into somebody's eye or head, they're going to know about it. So here we have another sea axe. This is a combat one. So we'll have two sorts on the table. We'll have ones that are sharp, designed for doing jobs around the longhouse. And as re-enactors, we have them blunt for going into combat and attacking Saxons and Normans with, because you're not allowed sharp weapons on the battlefield. So this is one of my most favourite ones. And this is really good, actually, if you're using a spear, because you can use a spear and you can hold your sea axe against a spear. And if you got to suddenly try to stab somebody, you pick your spear and splash it. And if you're lucky enough, get your spear back. But that used to be one of my favourite ones I used to use. It's got a very small antler handle, but it fits really nice in the hand. And since that practice, we used to do this. This has been banned in a lot of re-enactments where you can't carry a sea axe against your spear anymore. It's a shame, really. But that used to be so effective when it came to in the battlefield, and if you're quick, you can take out a guy with a sword quite easily and slash him across the chest, and you'll have to go down, depending on whether you've got a 1 or 2 or 3 hit point system. Some societies will say you've got to be hit 2 times where you go down, or some will say, well, you get hit once, you go down, or you get hit 3 times. It does depend on the society and group you're in. And that's a Paul Binns blade. So it's made of M45 spring steel, and it's not sharp. It's got no burrs on it because it's made so well and it's been heat treated lovely. And again, you've got a slight bit of decoration of a little brass plate here, just where the antler ends and meets the blade itself. And it's got a blind taper, so the taper will probably go up to about this area of the knife handle, compared to some tangs that go out and will come out the back and then I'll rivet it over on another plate. So that's also fascinating. So let's just put a couple of these away. Just bear with me. Oh, I'm spoilt by weapons here. I've probably got too many, but can you have enough Viking weapons? I don't think you can. So this one goes in there, because I've got these scabbards, these sheaves, I mean, and they're not quite done yet. I've got to trim it off and finish them off. It's a project for another day. So let's go have a look at the Germanic people. On my table, I do have a Germanic sea axe. It's a slightly different design. It's more of a machete than you call it a sea axe, but again, it's very nice. This came from Celtic Red Merchant and was quite cheap. In fact, I got it for free because they messed up my delivery. And I bought like £200 worth of stuff, and they refunded my money, and they still sent the stuff I had. And 2 of the items, including this one, I technically got still in box. And it came with a sheep as well. So, and we'll just compare it as the club falls off. Never mind. To this bit of another one. And you can see the difference in the style and the shape. In fact, this is razor sharp. This one. This is a broken back knife because of this segment, where this is a much different design. Earlier, and I said it's early Germanic, so this will be fighting the Romans, and this will be fighting the Saxons. And it's a really nice blade. Again, it'll be Indian. It's got walnut, an ash handle, and again, it's got a nice cap on the end, and it's got a nice brass cap here as well. And I do like that. So we'll put that away. And the belt's mine. I've had that for years because belts are so essential. So again, another sea axe here. This is another re-enactment one. It's a bit broader and has a nice handle antler. Again, it feels nice in the hand, which is so important. Again, this is blunt, so you can take it into battle re-enactment. This is another Paul Binns blade. I've got quite a few of his knives and blades over the years. And it's just such a lovely, lovely knife. In fact, this is probably about 30 to 35 years old. It does show you that these tools, they last forever if you look after them. So, yes. Let's just go and read some of your comments, because it's always important to read the comments. And just bear with me, because I just lost it then. Not literally in life, but I just lost the live stream. It's there. Come on, where are you? And we'll go back to the comments. Because if you've got any questions or any queries about these weapons on my table, then please let me know. I'll say hi in the comments. So we've got a couple of comments here I've not read. So Martin, no, we've got a comment here from Christ Ali. Did they have crossbows in the Saxon area? Well, no, I don't think they did. I think crossbows, although they have been around in different cultures, I think crossbows are much later. And of course, one thing we're not really talking about on the channel is slings and staff slings, because I don't have any. I did make a sling many years ago, but I've lost it somewhere. So, yeah, so much later. I mean, when I think about crossbows, I always think about the Normans, really. And I think that's probably because of the Robin Hood movie, when he gets attacked around this tree, what's got chopped down recently last year, the sycamore tree. And the Normans come up and attack him with a crossbow, and he attacks one with a helmet, if I recall. But I think they're much later. I do have a very good book on the crossbow. There's something I got to look into. And I don't own a crossbow. I've got bows. but I've never had a crossbow in my life. And I would love to own an authentic one. So there's hopefully that will answer that one. And if anybody knows any better, then let me know, because I don't know everything. So yeah. So Martin says, I have a 1939 one in the shed as well. Oh yes, and made some wonderful axes and hedge cutters and tools in World War One and World War Two, and they're brilliantly made because they're made out of good steel. Not compared to today, where things aren't made as great as they used to be. And then we have a comment here from Rob Napier. So hello, Rob. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Late Saxon, I believe. Quite. I know Normans used them. So yeah, possibly the crossbow may have come over in the very late Saxon age before the Battle of Hastings, but it probably would have been one of those rare items. And I don't know why the Saxons probably didn't think about taking it up more, but certainly the Normans did. And thank you for that. And we've got a... And Critely says, oh, okay. And then Aaron Kelly says hello. So hello to Aaron Kelly. And then Rob Napier says, indeed, not sure if they were used at Hastings. And hello, Aaron. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether the Normans used them at Hastings, but I think if they did, we probably would know about it. And probably the bow was probably more proficient in the sense of it takes a while to load up a crossbow. So it's more for light infantry kind of a tactic. So I think compared, you may get 1 or 2 rounds of a crossbow, let's say 2 in a minute, compared to 5 or 6 of a bow, and you probably do better than that if you're more proficient with a bow. And I know Rob will know this answer because he knows a lot about bows and probably more than I do. So And then we'll comment here from Martin Brown. I bought 2 swords from Celtic Web Merchant and a new Bolton sword scabbard in the last 3 weeks. Oh, very cool. I do look on their website to see what's on offer and what's for sale, but I can't really afford to spend any money at the moment on stuff I don't really need. But when I got a bit extra cash, I'll be definitely buying some nice things from them. But I got 2 swords down there. It's not even opened up yet. And then Martin says, I gave a crossbow away last week, lost that loud, as I had no need. Oh, you could have given it to me, could have talked about it. Never mind. But I think it's a lot of work in the crossbow, because the most important bit is if you've got an iron front at the bit what bends back, that's got to be really heat treated and really nicely. And I do have plans for actual Norman crossbows if anybody wants them. I can send them, perhaps. Yeah, well, nobody's an expert, but we try to do our best. So yeah, and then Martin says, the character Lee says, what were the Welsh up to whilst those poor Saxons were getting slaughtered by the Normans? Ha ha. Well, they was probably hiding away in the valleys and singing Welsh songs, probably. But no doubt some Welsh would have fought at Hastings. Perhaps they should have sided with the Saxons, and we may have a different outcome. But I always said that the Saxons would have sided with King Haraldo and not fought him at Stamford Bridge and at Fulford and brought all the Vikings down and then kicked the Normans out. Then history would say it'd be so much different. So Rob Napier says, cheers, Braggy. I'm no expert, just stuff I picked up. This is probably just like me. It's I read a lot, so I do know a lot from that side of things, but I do make mistakes. I'm not perfect, but yeah. Let's have a look what else we've got on the table. So here we've got a weapon that's the French got the name from, the Francisca, which is a throwing axe. So again, if you got the money and the coin and you got one of these knocking about the house, you may have one of these. Although it's more designed to be thrown before the battle, and you may not. I think I would prefer to use one of these rather than one of these in battle. And this is an actual French make on Etsy. It's very nice. I'd like to have another one which is actually properly forged, because I know how this is made. This has been laser cut out, folded over, or it's been laser cut out, and they got this tube and made the tube itself, and then welded the blade onto the tube. Would be how they made this. It's slightly crooked, if you can see, but Tiki has a really nice copy. Which I really would love to have a nice copy of a Francisca, and yeah. At some point, if I make an axe target, we might have to go out throwing a few of these things at a target. So then, if you got the money for a sea axe, you may have the money to have a Langsatz. And again, the other day we talked about these in depth. This is a cheap man's sword. You may not be able to afford one of these, but you may be able to afford a sea axe, which is a single edge knife. Now, I mean, Langsatz, a long knife. Lang is long. Sea axe is the Saxon word for sax, a knife. So I'm tired. I've been at work all day. I'm making mistakes, but you may have one of these. You may be lucky, you may have two. But would you go into battle with two of these? No, because this is your shield arm, and you've got to give your body some protection, or else you're going to get stabbed very quickly in the battlefield. So, yeah. And Cheech says, Welsh were hiding behind Offa's wall. Well, indeed they were. And, that must have been a feat in itself to make a whole, big ditch on the border of Wales. Let's just go and see the more live chats. Yeah. I hope the quality of the camera is okay. So let's have a look what else we've got. I mean, you may be very, very poor and only have a wooden stick. This is Anglo-Saxons rune stick I made them. Personally, I don't think that sort of thing would have been used in battle. But if you got no weapon, you got to use something, then that's an option. Personally, I'd have a sea axe and an axe if you was poor. And of course, I'm wealthy, so I've got a sword. And this sword isn't a normal sword because this is a pattern molded sword. The late Vendel or early Viking because of the length of the blade. And that is a very nice bit of kit. I mean, you're looking over £1,000 at least for something like that from the guy that made this. So that's a few options when it comes to weapons. So, any questions you want me to answer? So Martin says, I'm reading The Last Viking 1066, The Battle of Stamford Bridge by Berwick Coates. Well, let me know how that book goes. I've not heard of that book. And we are lucky. We do have a lot of books on the subject. So, yeah. Now, what else we got on the table? I'm not talked about. Now, we can put that away. I mean, would you have a helmet? So let's talk about a helmet. Again, that there's a lot of metal. You can make half a dozen axes out of this metal. Again, it kind of demonstrates that you're wealthy enough to have a helmet. But there's certainly been cases of Viking and Saxon graves found with wooden pots. So if you've got a wooden bowl and you can fit on your head, you may wear that. And that's certainly something that Eggle used to talk about quite a lot. The fact that you can remember digging a Saxon grave and they found this wooden pot and it had straps, I think, or remains of the straps. So it was speculated that, the warrior or the man who had it wore it in battle. But if that's the only thing you've got to protect your head, then you're going to use it. And then also leather caps and helmets were also around. But of course, those sorts of things don't really survive unless you've got the right conditions in the ground for them to survive in. But we certainly know that they had leather helmets and leather skull caps, and that will give you a bit of protection. But let's face it, if you're wearing a leather skull cap and you get attacked on the head by a sharp axe, it's going to cut through the leather and it's going to cut your skull and you're going to suffer badly from it. Now, other things you may have is just like your household knife you use around the house to cut your meat with or your bread. And if that's the only thing you got in a shield, well, you're going to use that because you don't have the reach. So chances are you're not going to survive too long. And of course, if you got caught and captured and you was quite poor, then chances are they're going to, smack you in the head and throw you in a grave. But if you was caught and you was wealthy, if you was quite high up in status, then they would hold you to ransom because your family will be willing to pay 200 silver coins to whoever's got you captured. So that was also something that happened quite a lot to the higher status Vikings and Saxons, although most people wouldn't have that sort of ability and gold and money. So, yes, I suppose the most weirdest thing would have gone with a spoon, but a spoon wouldn't do me no good on the battlefield. You just get laughed at. I can remember once when we were doing American Civil War reenacting and we fell out with our officer, so we all decided to put down our muskets and go into battle with a spoon. And we got told off, but the officer never messed with us again. So, yeah. So we've got a comment here from Critcher Lee. What money was used by Saxons? I have an Edward Long cross penny from the 1200s. It was very expensive. I thought of something nearly 1,000 years old. Well, if you watch my last live stream, I do go into money quite a bit. And of course, I had coins and I had pennies. And of course, pennies were also cut in half and were quartered because 1 penny was quite a lot. And I think what Martin was saying, the average man would have earned 20 to 30 coins a week, which to me seems like a lot of money in those days. But it also depends on the value of the coin. So, yeah, so they were quite expensive. And of course, you also get most coins were silver back in the day. And if you're very rich, you could have gold coins. And of course, you also had ingots as a way of trading as well, because that would be worth a certain amount. But I do go into that in a much more detailed video on the last live stream, which is a live stream about, it's about the boat rig of Viking Anglo-Saxons. So if you watch that live stream, you'll get some really good answers on that. So, yeah. I have to think about it on Thursday, so I'm going to crack open a beer because every Viking needs a drink. And talking on camera can be quite nattering on your voice. I've already been busy today talking all day. Although I don't have an authentic glass holder. I'm drinking a Copperberg. It's in a Copperberg glass, which is one of my favourite ciders. So cheers, everybody. Of course, if you're very, very rich, you may have something like this. Let's just move this helmet, which is a Saxon helm. In fact, this little front guard needs to be adjusted. So what I've got to do with this, as I get my hand inside of it, I've got to adjust this piece here and knock it forward so it's more straight, because when you wear it, it's really tight in your face and your nose. It's really compressing on your nose. So at some point, I've got to just work this with a hammer and just give it a good smack, and then that will sort that out. And you can kind of see the progress from the Roman period when it comes to the shape of the helmet. This is a Roman helmet. It's got the same sort of shape as the Coppergate, because that's where the fundamental design of the Coppergate and the early helmets came from. It came from the Roman helmets. And you know when you're wearing this because it gives you a headache after an hour, whereas wearing something like this doesn't give you a headache. So the Romans must have been very, very tough. And of course, they both got cheek plates, which are quite essential. But as the helmets progressed in time, they got rid of the cheek plates, which is a bit of a shame. And of course, this is a very nice copy. And what I like about it, it's even got a hanger you can hang from, so it's got a handle. So how clever is that? I mean, it shows you that the Romans were so clever. And it's got some lovely features and some nice rivets. It's a bit rusty because it's been knocking about for years. And you could also have the ability to have a plume of feathers on top, which some of them did have, which is what this little mounting is for. But I'm not certain what this hook is for. I assume it's for the same thing. You would push it through and hook it over, and then you can have a bloom of feathers or hairs, like some of the Roman helmets did have. But it's a little bit excessive for my liking. But they really thought about the design. And of course, you've got a cutting for your ear. And then again, that's a very clever design element of the helmet, because when you're in a battle, let's try to put it on if I can. You want to be able to hear the man, who's giving orders. And so it's very important that you have your ear free, because if you're wearing, I'll put this on next, you wear a helmet and it covers up your ear. It really does make it difficult to hear a command from somebody behind you, because most of the guys that ran the regiments and were given the orders will probably stand behind the troop, because you don't want them to go down in battle. It was very important that you had that ability. So that's a really ingenious design. Of course, I wear it with a wool hat. It's got nothing on the inside like some of the helmets did have. Although this is a modern one, it's been rolled up with the two halves. So it's a modern interpretation. But yeah, it's just lovely how you can just hold it by the handle, which is a brass handle. And of course, the thought about it is to put brass around the edge as well. So you got a smooth edge, because what you don't want is a sharp edge to cut your hand, because one little cut back in those periods, in the medieval times, you get an infection, and that infection, just from a small cut, could kill you. So we've got a comment here from Rob Napier. I got to bail. Night all and take care. Well, good night, Rob, and thank you for joining the chat. So you can kind of see with the Coppergate, this is a Saxon helmet. The progression from the two, they've got the same sort of style in shape. Because so put this down, bear with me. They put it there for a minute. Because they're clever, they learn from the past. But of course, helmets changed and they became more conical and sharper, so that when you got a knife, it's not going to dig in and it's going to glance down the helmet. And I don't really have a helmet that demonstrates that available because a lot of my helmets are in a box at the moment. Well, yeah, and that's a really expensive bit of kit. It's not one of the cheap copies you get. This is one of the most. This is a really expensive copy. But I just noticed some of my mail needs sorting out, so that's a job to do for another day. I mean, you can buy these online for about £500, but you're not going to get one as good as this. This is a museum quality piece, and I hope the camera's giving it justice. Let's put it on for you. Now, this one's quite interesting because on the inside, it's got a felt liner. And of course, felt is a very old material, so it's been around for a long time, since the Iron Age. So you can put that on first, but generally, I like to put it in here first. So we'll get that sorted. We'll put the felt liner inside. And then we're going to put the helmet on. And then that's what that's like. And of course, it's got two straps, so you can tie it off, which is quite essential. But again, with this helmet, it covers up your ears, so it's quite difficult to hear commands. And you also sound different when you talk. That one you don't, because it echoes out, not the same as this one. But when I'm wearing this, I can definitely notice the difference in the way I sound to myself. Probably not to you guys. I don't know whether that's whether I sound different now wearing a helmet. I'd be quite curious to know. But I can certainly sound more echoey wearing the helmet. And of course, you've got your cheek plates to protect your face, but they, like I said, they gradually went out of fashion. And of course, you've got an aventail of mail, which is again quite essential to protect your back. This helmet has another aventail design, but it's got strips of metal. This is another design by the Saxons, and again, this went out and mail was more popular. This is a much earlier helmet, but it's on the same style and the same age of this compared to a Viking helm. And I can show you a Viking helm. There's this one here, which I made as this falls out. I made that when I was 16 years old. So even way back in the day when I wasn't into Viking re-enactment, I was making Viking helmets for myself. And this is a copy of one of a magazine. In fact, it needs a bit of work because this cheek plate doesn't like to stay on. So I've got to remake these hinges at some point. And when I made this helmet, I made a mistake. I didn't make the cheek plate long enough. So what I may do is make some new cheek plates a bit longer, the same style of the Coppergate helmet. If you're told, that's much longer and much better on this helmet. So let me try to get this helmet on my head. So bear with me. I can hear again. Hey! Again, it's got an aventail of mail. So let me just sort this cheek plate out. It's just got old and it's got worn, and it doesn't like to stay on. And when you've got an aventail, you've got to flick it over if you can. There you go, it's come off again. It's a project for another day to repair. But there's never enough time in the day. I designed this helmet to fit my head perfectly without a liner. So it does feel really nice. And again, it's got a nice bit of decoration on the front of a beast, kind of a character. In fact, at some point, I'll take a picture of it and I'll take a picture of the picture I copied it from, and you can compare it. But you can see that cheek plate is just not long enough. It does the job. But again, you can't hear it very well. And this is more of a Viking home than a Saxon home. Because I made that, when did I make that? In 1993. I did have a help by a guy called Dave, who was a sheet metal worker, who gave me a bit of help with this. And I blackened it up with a torch to get this blacking effect. Because one of the reasons why you may choose to have a darker helmet is because it stops rust. Whereas you've got a shiny helmet, it's more likely to get the fingerprints and rust. So that's one of the reasons why it's darker, and I think it looks better than a shiny helmet myself. And of course, if you've got a shiny helmet, you can be seen from a good distance away. This isn't going to shine in the sun, not going to give away, where you are if you're, let's say, hiding in a bus waiting to ambush somebody. So, yes, we have that. Let's just go back to the chat. So Martin says, that's the Viking Martin Brown. And I do urge you guys to go and check out Martin's channel and give him a subscribe, because he's got some lovely little short videos, and he's got some lovely Viking kit to show you. So do go and give him a like and a subscribe. And he says, I have just a late Viking and early Norman helmet. Yeah, I don't really have, well, I do have some Norman helmet somewhere. I think I probably own, I don't know, 15 helmets. And I'm heading towards, I must be heading toward 20 helmets. And I got another one in the post the other day, but I'm not unboxed it yet. So, yeah. So, Critch Ali says, it seems similar sounds. It probably does, but definitely when I wear a helmet, I wear one that covers up your ears, and it does sound more echoey. And with this helmet, you got a lining as well of leather. In fact, it's needs some padding, so I got some kind of wool underneath to pad it out a bit. So before that, it used to sit too low on my face, and it will cover up your eyes. And it does need a bit of work. And this one is an American-made helmet, whereas these two are English-made. So that's an American trader, and you do find them now and again, and I think he still makes them. And it's got a nice bit of decoration of the eyebrows, and it's got a picture of a beast here over this bit and another beast at the back. And this is hollow. Some of them would be hollow, but a lot of them would be solid cast. So we'll put that there. Behave yourself. Now let me drink some beer. I'm thirsty. So Martin Hale says, does anybody know who owned the Coppergate helmet? Well, it's often said that the Coppergate helmet was owned by a Northumbrian prince, but I don't think they really associated who owns it, unless the inscription over the top and the side tells you, but I can't remember what the inscription says. And let's see if we can find the answer to that, of what the inscription says on the Coppergate helmet, and then we can talk about it, because I don't remember everything, and I got so much in my brain going on. So bear with me. We're going to research this now and remind myself what the inscription. I think it's a Christian inscription, if I remember, but I could be wrong. Of course, I personally wouldn't know this. Would be Tearcare, because that used to be his helmet, and he really does know that helmet quite well. So what I'm talking about is on the Coppergate helmet, you have these brass bands, and on these brass bands are inscriptions. And there's some very weird symbols. It's not in runes, so it'll probably be in some kind of Anglo-Saxon text, I would think. But we'll have a look. So it's got in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, and God, and to all we say Amen. Oshure. So it's the inscription on the Coppergate helmet, like I said, is a Christian inscription, because it was a Saxon helmet, and the Saxon who owned it was a Christian. And they say, it was a prince, but I suppose it could be a king as well, but they don't really know who owns it. And it's a shame, really, because we lost that evidence of who owned the Coppergate helmet. But that's quite interesting. I know it was a Christian-based inscription, because it's not something you want to wear into battle, because you'd be paying £1,000 or more for something like this to be well made. So the last thing you want is to take it into a battle reenactment and have old Irish over there smack you on the head by mistake with their sword and put a bit of a mark in it. So it's more of a display helmet, although it has been worn in battle, no doubt, because I've worn it in battle a couple of times. I know that Tearcare did, but you would wear something like this in battle, which is cheaper, and you don't mind if that gets damaged. I don't mind at all, but I would be upset if that got damaged. Now it's going to rain at 10 o'clock. Hey, we've had so much rain, haven't we, recently? And do you not think at the moment it's still, considering it's April, it's still very, very cold? But let's talk about what I'm wearing in this video. So I'm wearing a woolen cloak, and this is like a secret weapon because this is a penania brooch. And I often say, if you get captured, so I've been in a battle, let's say I've been fighting, I'm a Saxon, and I've been fighting some Vikings in a small skirmish or maybe a larger battle, and the Saxons lose and they capture a load of us men who survived the battle. Now, the poor men will probably get put to death because they don't want to have to deal with them and they're not worth anything. But I'm worth something because I've got a sword and I've got an estate and a family with a lot of wealth. So they'll take my weapons off me and they'll say, right, we're going to hold you to ransom. And when your relatives decide to pay up the 500 silver pieces we want, or 5,000, it could be 5,000, it could be 500, depending on how much value you're worth. They'll say, well, we're going to keep you captured up north in Northumbria, where we've got our base. And when your relatives pay the money, we'll hand you back. But, they may be stupid enough and say, well, you can wear your clothes, and they may leave me with this item here. But I surely agree, if I got that in my hand and I'm waiting, I'm in a long house, locked in a room, and some Viking comes in to give me some food, when I surprise him, stab him in the neck, he goes down, the door's open, there's a chance I could escape. So this is one of those sort of weapons, and it's something that would be used by the women folk as well, because these are quite lethal, these pikes. Let's face it, you only got to stab someone in the neck with one of these, and they'll bleed to death. So again, another option is to have one of these. Mostly, I would say that if you got caught, they're going to take that off you because they're going to realise, because the Vikings weren't daft, that you could hurt somebody with that. So let's just go and find the live stream. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to go and subscribe. We do make daily content as much as possible and long formats as well. And we do have a large, portfolio of videos for you to go and watch. I mean, there's 2,040 videos on the channel now, and I've still got thousands to edit. It's never going to end. But we have fun doing it, and this is what the important factor is. Now, another weapon you may have in your house is one of these, a meat cleaver. Again, this is a World War II British Army issue meat cleaver. And I've had this for years. This was passed down to me by a friend of mine called Tecto. And again, it is razor sharp, this is, because it's designed to cut up meat and bone. But is this the only thing you've got with your Viking shield? Then by the gods, you're going to take it into battle. And that would really hurt somebody. But of course, you've got to be very skilled at fighting to be able to fight with something like this. And again, in modern re-enactment, that would never be allowed on the battlefield. That is purely there for using whilst cooking. It's very much like this one. In fact, these two came together and from the same chap who gave them to me. This is much, you can see that bends, but this one, no chance of bending. In fact, you can still buy these. In fact, it's so sharp, I can't hold it by the sharpness because it will cut myself. And again, I've got scars on my hand from both of these things because now and again, cutting something and you slip, you cut your hand. And again, that could be very deadly in the Viking times and the Saxon times. One little small cut, you get infected and you can't deal with that infection. You don't have penicillin like we do today and medicine. You're going to die from that cut. And it's going to be a very slow and agonising death as well. So the Viking Martin Brown says, I'm wearing a Mark 5 or 6 British Army helmet in the 1990s. Oh, cool. Well, my uncle was a RSM in the Tank Corps in the 1980s and 90s, and he served 25 years in the army. It's unbelievable, that, isn't it? But I never met him. And Martin Brown says, I'm building up a nice display of Viking Age toys. Do you own any? Well, no. I don't really. You'll have to show me some pictures of them because I'm very curious to see what you got. When it comes to toys, we don't really think about toys in the same sense as we do today. But no doubt such things were available and around. Let's face it, if you've got a family and you've got some children, you may want to make them a small doll, or you may want to make them, a little long ship out of wood. So those are wonderful little items to have, and they tell a lot about the culture as well. So yeah, please do make a video on your channel with the toys you got from the Viking age, because I'll be very interested to see. And of course, I'm always looking for traders and contacts to add to our list, because people do ask me, saying, "Oh, Braggy, can you recommend somebody that makes an axe, or can you recommend somebody that makes a sword?" And the more good traders we know, the better. Let's talk about beer while I'm here and I'm drinking beer, because beer was very essential. And you may be asking yourself, well, why is beer essential and drink during the medieval times? But most people in the medieval times did not have a good source of water. Unless you was very lucky, you lived in the mountains and you had a spring close by, which you knew was pure, then all the time you had to boil your water. And let's face it, to make the boiling water during the Viking times takes a lot of work, because you've got to get your kindling, you've got to get your wood for your fire. And if you're very lucky, you may have some coal, because coal was available. Because the Romans came in, they dug lots of mines, lots of quarries, and they was left over after the Romans left in the mid 5th century. So coal was also available, but would have been more rare. The most common thing would have been available was charcoal, because charcoal was being made all over the place. And it's such a skill to see somebody actually make charcoal the authentic way, where they get a load of wood and then they season it and dry it. It's got to be dry. If your wood isn't dry, when you make a kiln for your charcoal, it can explode. And you can end up with bits of wood and charcoal everywhere, and it's a right mess. So, so charcoal is such an important and fascinating skill. So you've got to chop your logs, and your logs have all got to be the same shape and size, and then you leave them to dry over months and months. And when you know that they're dry, and often a way to test wood is you put it to your lip, because you can always tell damp wood when you put it to your lip, because it will feel damp. I know when I put this to my lip, it's dry because it's been in my house and it's a dry bit of wood. But when you put your lip to a damp bit of wood, you can feel the dampness in it. So that's one method in the old times, how they will test a bit of wood to see whether it's dry. And it's so essential to have dry wood, especially if you're using wood in your fire, because if you've got damp wood, it's not very efficient, and you're wasting your heat to dry the wood in your fire. So you'd be having wood on the go all the time. You'll be having a wood pile because you've got to get wood in. And it does make you think, really, because you lived in a small village. Where did they get the wood from? And yes, they've got woods and forests, but it takes a long time to chop all that down. So especially during the 18th or 19th century, when nobody had a log burner in the house or an open fire. But then you have people that specialise that themselves. So what you do, you get your wood, it's dried, and then you make a pile, and then you cover it with soil. Then basically you light it. You have a little chamber at the bottom which you can light, and then you can light your charcoal. I'm not an expert when it comes to charcoal, but I've seen it done a couple of times, and it's fascinating. And then you have to wait 2 or 3 days, and you have to stay around it, and you have to keep putting soil. Sometimes the flames will burn through the soil, so you've got to put more soil on. And it really is an art form. And no doubt there's some wonderful, wonderful videos on YouTube about making charcoal. So we've got a couple of comments here from Sam Stapleton. Oh, I made it. Damn, YouTube still ain't notifying the live streams. Yeah, that's a bit of a... Yeah, that's always been a problem with YouTube, is notifications. And I don't know if it's because some days I put too much content out and there's a limit of notifications you get, but I don't know whether that's a myth on YouTube, and whether you can put too much out and get, whether there's a certain limit on notifications YouTube send out. But let's face it, if I'm putting out 6 short videos, a long format video, and I'm doing 1 community post, that's 8 things a day, and a live stream is 9. Oh, good lucky number. But yeah, I mean, YouTube have got to fix that. And there's also a problem at the moment on YouTube. The last couple of days, there's been a comments problem where comments aren't showing up, even though they're still there. And quite funnily, earlier, and we had a troll on the channel from Russia. And I might finish this live stream with a story about trolls, if you like, because I do like telling folk tales and stories. I made a very funny video. It kind of showed President Putin with a general, and I kind of linked it in saying with some medieval peasant weapons like clubs and spears, saying this is what the Russian army are going to be armed with in 2024 in Ukraine. It's just a jokey video. But we had a Russian troll coming on saying, well, Russia's going to win the war and we're going to be a great federation and we're going to gain back all our countries we'd lost. But I just feel sorry for anybody who lives in Russia, that you have very little freedom. And it's about time Russian people, in my opinion, I don't do politics often on the channel, but I think it's about time the Russian people grew a pair of bollocks and got a backbone and stood up for themselves. And I know it could be quite frightening in Russia where, you know, you go and demonstrate, you know, on the street and you're going to end up in a prison pretty much damn quick and probably beaten up very badly. And, yeah. So on the channel, whenever we get a troll, we don't get trolls very often, I always tell a troll story. So many years ago, in the times of the Norwegian Vikings, those very brave and big men, and not forget the women as well from Norway because they're tough as well, there lived a man, and he was married. And he was an old Viking at this stage in his life. He had a very, very long white beard. Yeah, so he was old. He was probably my age, in his 40s, and he had 3 sons. And he had a bit of land. And on the land, he had a large, large forest. But our Viking man, who remains nameless in the story, he owed a lot of money to somebody. You know, so somebody lent him some money, another Viking, and that other Viking was saying, "Oh, I want my money back." And he was perplexed over this. You know, what we're going to do? And so he talked to his wife, because, you know, in those days you talk to your wife and you talk about your problems, and they came up with a solution. Let's send out our oldest son tomorrow to go and hew down a load of wood in the forest and make logs, and then we can sell those logs. And over time, we can pay off our debt. And so this is what happened. The very morning, when the sun rose up, they all got up to do the chores, and he called over his oldest son, who again remains nameless in this story. And he said, "I want you to go and get an axe and go into the forest and chop down some trees and make logs. You must do this because we are in debt." And of course, being in debt is never a good thing, whether it's in the modern world or in the times of the Vikings. You do not want to be in debt to somebody else. And so the oldest son, who has not long become a man, said, "Oh, I'll do that, father. I'll go out and I'll chop down a load of wood and make a load of logs." And so he went to see his mother, and she gave him a little bag, put a bit of bread in the bag and a bit of cheese. He said, "There you are, son." And he left off. It's a few leagues away, a few miles he had to go, a few kilometres. And so he walked over a field until he saw the edge of the wood, and he started to go into the wood. And he knew a place in the wood where it had a clearing, and there was lots of trees already fell down with the storms. So I thought, I'll start there. And so he walked over to the wood, and he saw a tree. He thought, right, I'll start chopping this tree up. And he started chopping. And he's been working all morning. He already made a nice pile of logs and with his axe, very sharp at. But then something in the distance, he heard a noise. It's like, he thought, what's that? Like a large banging noise. And it got louder and louder and louder. And he thought, what in the gods is that noise? And then suddenly in the distance, he saw trees move, sway left and right. And the noise got louder and louder and louder until he saw the point where he saw a giant, enormous troll. It was a very ugly troll. It had big eyes, massive ears, and a most ugly nose and a big chin. And the troll said, "Who's that hewing and chopping wood in my forest?" And the little man, the son of the Viking, he thought, "Oh my God, by the gods, by Thor, by Odin's beard." He saw the troll. He was so scared he dropped the axe and he ran off back home. And a few hours later, he got back home. This is a very old story, way back in the medieval times. And he said to his father, "Dad, father, I was in the wood and a massive troll came and I could do nothing. It was so big, it was bigger than the trees. So I ran away. His dad shook his fist and said, "Why, you? I'm so disappointed in you." And he was in a bad mood all night. Well, that night in bed, the old man, the old Viking with the white beard, he's had his life, he's been raiding, he's done wonderful things and had an amazing journey. He had 2 more sons. And so he said, "We'll send tomorrow the middle son and see if he can't go and chop some wood and make us some coin, some money." And so, next morning he got up at sunrise and his mum got some food together and his middle-aged son, again who remained nameless, goes and sees his mother, got a nice leather bag with a bit of bread and some more cheese. Oh, luxury. Oh, I wish I had bread and cheese right now because I'm hungry. And this his father said, "You must go out, son, and go and chop down the wood and make us logs and money." Reluctantly, the middle-aged son agreed to do this and went off again to the wood in the distance, a big forest. It took all morning to walk there, and he walked through the forest until he came to the very same clearing. And he saw on the ground the axe, which his older brother dropped, and the bag. Of course, his brother being a bit greedy, had already ate the cheese and the bread from the day before. And so he got his axe out, he started to chop up more logs, and made another pile of logs. But again, and you know what's going to happen in the story, he heard the thumping noise. He thought, "What's that?" He looked around. Again, the noises louder and louder until the trees started to move and sway in the air, and the ugly big troll appeared, taller than the trees itself. And he said, "Who's that? Chopping and hewing wood in my forest?" As the troll shouted. And the middle-aged son, well, he dropped his axe, he threw it on the ground and his leather bag, and he ran as fast as he could out of the wood and back home. And he came to see his father, the old Viking with the white beard. And he said, "Father," said, "the troll came out and I was so scared. I had to run. I could do nothing. I couldn't fight the troll." His dad said, "I am disappointed in you, my son. I thought you, being the bravest of all the sons I've got, would go and chop some logs for me." And he said, "You must go. I don't want to see you for a few days." And again, it became night time. The sun was setting, and the old Viking and his wife went to bed. And they talked about what happened that day. They said, "Well, why don't we send out our youngest son?" And by chance, his name was called Boots. Although in some legends and some tales, he is also known as the Ash Lad. Well, there are 3 stories associated with this guy called Boots. And what a funny name to be called Boots. Boots. And the very next morning, the sun came up, and the old Viking, sitting in his big long house in a big chair at the end of the hall, said, "You must come over, Boots. I want a word with you." And he gave him an axe. "And here's your axe." I said, "I want you to go out and chop down some trees and make some logs and make some coin because we are in debt." And so Boots, he agreed to do this. And so he went to see his mother, and he got a leather bag like this, a scrip bag. A scrip bag is a bag. This is watertight, and it won't leak. And he said, "Well, Mother, have you got some bread and cheese for me?" And he said, "Oh, no, son." He said, "All the bread and cheese was taken by your 2 older brothers, and the only thing I have is a whey of cheese, a ball of cheese which is in the development of forming and being made. And this is why he needed a scrip bag, a bag that was watertight, so that he could put the whey of cheese in the bag, and all the whey, all the cheese, all the juice would not leak out." Well, Boots was happy with this. He thought, "Oh, well, God, that's fair enough. I got a whey of cheese. I could drink the juice from the cheese because it stayed in the cheese itself, and because his bag was watertight, it did not leak out." And so he set off with an axe to the big forest. a few leagues, a few miles away, or kilometres. And he walks all morning until it got noon, and he could tell it was noon because the sun was at the highest. Not like today when you got your mobile phone and your smart watch on your wrist to tell what time it was. In those times, you had to tell the time from where the sun was in the sky. And of course, this is the thing that's been passed down from generation. And it's a very old thing in itself, knowing the time from the sun. And so, he got into the forest and he walked through the forest until he came to the same clearing. And on the ground, he saw 2 axes and 2 leather shoulder bags. Of course, there was no cheese and no bread because the 2 greedy older brothers ate all that. And so he got his axe and he started to chop down trees and he started to make logs. And he was doing this all morning. He thought, I've done well. I'll sit down for a little bit on the log and eat my way of cheese. Just as he's about to do that, he heard the thumping noise in the distance. What's that? He said. He looked around. He did not know what it was. And again, it kept on getting louder and louder and louder until the point came when the trees moved. And appearing above the tree was the troll with the big ugly nose and the bulbous eyes and the big ugly ears and the chin that stood out for a good league. And he thought, oh my God, I've never seen a troll before. And the troll shouted out, who's that? Doing and chopping wood in my forest. Well, Boots, being a brave young Viking, said, well, it's me, Boots, and I've come here to chop some logs. And the troll said, well, how dare you chop logs in my forest? Well, Boots was no ordinary Viking. He was very smart. And he thought to himself very quickly, so what can I do? I can't fight the troll, he's too big. I've only got an axe, don't even have a shield or a spear. And he remembered that he's got his leather bag, the script bag, the way of cheese. And so very quickly, he got in his bag and he got out the way of cheese. It was in a ball. And he said, if you come and attack me, I will get this stone. And he squeezed the way of cheese and all the juice came out. Now the troll, being rather dumb and stupid, thought it was a stone. He said, I'll get your head like this stone and I'll squeeze out all the juice. And so he squeezed the way of cheese and all the juice, all the way of the cheese came out. And the troll thought this was a big stone and that if this little Viking could squeeze out the juice of a stone, what do you think he's going to do to his head? Well, the big troll stood there and thought for a minute. He said, well, and he was one of those trolls that he could walk about in the daytime. It would not affect him because some trolls could be affected by daylight and would turn to stone. Some trolls had the ability not to be turned to stone, and he was one of those trolls. He was one of the bigger trolls from the north of Norway, not like one of those Swedish trolls that was part human and a bit of a shape changer. He was ginormous. Can you imagine him, a troll big as a tree? And so the troll scratched his beard and said, I'll tell you what, my little Viking friend, because I don't want to have my head squeezed and all my brains to be poured out. How about you and me chop wood all day? Because I need logs for my cave and you need logs for your longhouse and to pay off your father's debt. And so Boots, the Viking, said, I'll agree to this. And so all afternoon, the troll had a most ginormous axe and Boots with a smaller axe chopped up logs. And Boots had a nice big pile and the troll had a much larger pile. But it was getting to the point of the day where the sun was setting. Boots got so carried away he forgot about this, and it was too late for him to walk back home. And the troll said, I tell you what, my little friend, you can come back to my cave, and I will put you up for the night, on my word. And so Boots reluctantly agreed to this. Now, would you agree to going back to the cave of a troll? I don't know if I would. But in this case, this is what Boots did. And so, he came back to this cave, and it was a ginormous cave. And there was chests of gold and all these manner of wonderful things and old weapons and swords. In fact, Boots had to wipe his eyes. He couldn't believe such luxury things were in this cave. And the troll said to him, how about you and me have an eating competition? a match to see who can eat the most porridge. Well, Boots was hungry, and he'd been chopping wood all day, so I think you probably agree he probably wants a good bowl of porridge. And he says, "Okay, that sounds like a good plan." And so the troll went to the back of the cave, and he brought forth a large kettle, a large cauldron. And he said, "There you go, Boots, you go and get the cauldron for the water, and I will go and get the oats." Well, Boots is not a stupid Viking. He realised that the troll was trying to trick him here to see whether he could actually lift up this big kettle, because it was ginormous. And Boots said, "No, no, 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 my friend. I will go and get the porridge, and you can go and get the water in the old kettle." And the troll, being stupid, agreed to this. And so, Boots got the kettle, just managed to lift it on the fireplace. And after the troll brought it back with water, and they poured in a load of oats and started with a big ladle like this to mix it all up. And then the troll got two bowls that were the same size, made of wood. And they said, "Right, let's see how many bowls of porridge you can eat." And so they got the first bowl, they got a nice spoon. Somewhere I've got a spoon on my table. They got a spoon and started to eat the porridge. And they had one bowl, then another bowl, another bowl, and another bowl. And it got to the point when he's had 10 bowls of porridge and he was getting full. And he thought to himself, "I'm going to lose this match. I do not want to be losing a match to a troll. What would all my relatives say?" And he remembered he had this bag. So he thought, "Oh, when the troll's not looking, I will spoon the porridge in my bag." And he kind of had it hidden under a cloak. And the bag was a pale kind of a leather. And so after another 10 bowls of porridge, that's 20 bowls that the troll have had, and 20 bowls that Boots have had. But of course, Boots was being clever. He was spooning it, and the troll wasn't looking into his bag. But it got to the point where the bag was full. It was full of porridge. There was no more room. In fact, porridge was starting to fall out. He thought to himself, "I know what." And so he got a little knife. Let's just find a little knife. There we go. Use this one. And he cut a little slit at the bottom of the bag so that the porridge could escape and land on the floor without the troll knowing. Of course, the troll didn't think it was a bag. The troll thought it was his tummy. And the troll said, "Oh, I don't know how you're eating all that porridge." And then he looked down and he saw the leather bag and the split. And he said, "Right, it's quite simple." He says, "I got a knife." So you look, I got a knife, and I cut my stomach. And then when I eat, all the porridge comes out. Well, the troll, being stupid, thought, "Oh, I could do that." And so he got an old rusty knife, and the troll went and cut his belly open, and all of his intestines and all of his guts came out, and the troll died. Well, that is not the end of the story, folks, because Boots now got a big cave with all these boxes and chests of treasure. And I thought, I could take one of these back home, and I could bury the rest. I'll be rich. And my dad will pay off his debt, and my father would have no more debt to that horrible Viking we don't like. And so he tried to get one of the chests and lift it up. And Boots was a strong little warrior, but he could not do it. He tried and tried in vain to lift up this chest. And there was no way he could do it. I thought, what's going on here? And then he remembered something. When he was a young man, when his grandfather was about, and very old Viking, he remembered a story about trolls' treasure. And that sometimes a troll has treasure and it's got some kind of magic on it to stop you from lifting it up. And so he remembered this. He remembered that the way you get rid of the magic on the chest is to throw in a knife of iron, a bit of iron. So he got his knife in his little pouch, he pulled it out of the porridge, and he threw it in the chest. That dispersed the magic, and he was able to lift up the chest of gold and silver and all the wonderful things like this and like that. And he walked back home with the chest. And he showed his father, "Oh, father, look what I've got." And he told him all about this story. And that there is the story of Boots, who had a match with the troll. And I do hope you enjoyed that tale. But it does remind me of another tale when it comes to trolls, and one from Denmark called The Troll's Ale. It's quite relevant as I'm drinking beer. So many, many years ago, 1,000 years or more, there was a Viking. There's always a Viking in these stories, and he was very well off. He had a lot of coin, a lot of land, and he was very wealthy. He had servants, and you name it, he had swords, and all the wonderful things. And his daughter, his dossier in Saxon, is where we get the word daughter from, dossier, was getting married. And of course, in those times, when he got married, they had a big feast, and he got mutton, and he got deer, and he got boar, and bacon, and he had wine from Francia, and he had cider made of apples. He had all these wonderful luxury things. And so all weekend, for days and days, they've been partying away, because sometimes some of these Viking festivals would go on for quite a while, because let's face it, the Vikings knew how to have a good time. And so it was night time, and suddenly there was a knock at the door. 4 loud knocks. He thought, who's that? Because he's invited all his neighbours, but all his neighbours came, and all his relatives came to the wedding. And so there's nobody meant to be coming to the door. And again, it knocked again. And so the old Viking with another white beard went and opened the door. And this, to his shock and to his surprise, outside the door was a big troll. Well, at first he thought, I'm going to have to grab my knife and defend the household. But that wasn't the case. The troll said, hello, I'm your neighbour. Said, I live in those rocks and caves over in the distance. And tonight, my friend, we're having a wedding because my troll daughter, Troll Dossier, is getting married to another troll. And we've run out of ale. And said, would you kindly give me a barrel of your beer? Well, the old Viking thought about it and thought, well, you don't want to upset a troll, do you? Because let's face it, trolls are quite big. And he doesn't want his wedding and his old wedding to be upset by a troll. So he said, all right, yeah. He shouted one of his servants called Olaf, yeah, go and get a barrel of beer. And so he bought his big barrel of beer, had 100 pints of beer in it, that's a lot of beer. And he gave it to the troll. And the troll said, well, thank you very much, my Viking friend. And in return, in 7 days, I will bring back a barrel of ale for you in replace. Well, the old Viking, he stroked his little chin and thought, well, that's not a bad deal, really, is it? Give away a barrel of beer, get one back. He was happy. But he thought to himself, is he going to do it? Is this troll going to keep his word? 7 days passed. And there was a knock on the door. And he said, Olaf, open the door. And he opened the door, and there was a troll with a big barrel of beer. And he said, this is your troll for your master, your lord, you must give it to him. But he says it's a very special barrel, because this barrel of beer will never run dry. But I warn you once, if you open up this barrel of beer, the magic will go. And so the old Viking, was told this by his servant Olaf. He thought, well, that can't be true. And he got all his men, all his armed men were there, because he had quite a few servants and quite a few people who lived on his little land. He had estate. And he told them all about this barrel of beer. And, that can't be true. Well, let's try it. So they all got horns and drinking vessels and started to empty the barrel. And they'd been drinking all night. And they thought, well, surely the barrel's got to be empty by now. And they tried to lift the barrel up. It was still full of beer. They thought, that's strange, isn't it? And so the next day, they thought, let's do it again. So the next day, they got together after being working in the field and getting the chores done. And they all started to drink from the barrel of beer. I wish I had one like that. And again, they drank all night to the point they got sloshed. They got so drunk. But Olaf didn't drink a lot. And he said, let's go and try this barrel of beer. And he tried to lift it up. And again, it was still full of beer. Because you can tell when a barrel gets drunk, it becomes very light because it's empty. But in this case, it was not empty. And for many occasions, they kept on trying to empty this barrel of beer. I really do wish I had a barrel of beer in my life like that, because that would be wonderful. And so many occasions you heard about it. And after a while, the rumours got about this barrel of beer. And people came from far and wide to see it and to drink beer, to see whether they could drink the barrel dry. You thought, by the gods, this must be some magical item made by dwarfs or by the gods. But it wasn't. It was a troll barrel and it was a troll beer. And of course, trolls have their own magic. And so many, many years passed. And then one day, the old Viking needed a new servant girl because the old servant girl got so old she died. And so, he hired this servant girl who was a bit naive and a bit stupid. And she heard about this magical barrel of beer. By this point, it had its own stand in the long house, the long hall. And she thought to herself, well, this can't be true. And so one morning, when the Lord, the Earl, wasn't looking, she got an axe. And she prized up the barrel lid. And to her shock, to the horror of the people, the barrel was full of frogs. And of course, because the servant girl had opened up the barrel, the magic had gone. But would you, drink a barrel of beer that had frogs in it? Well, if you didn't know about the frogs, you wouldn't know, would you? And so you'd be quite happy to drink it. But just think, they've been drinking frog beer. And that is the story from Denmark. And I do hope you've enjoyed that story. Oh, yes. So let's just go and read some of your comments, and I hope you like those two stories about trolls, because it's such a fascinating thing, and trolls themselves are a fascinating thing, and go back so far in history. It is really amazing. So we've got a comment here. So Sam Stapleton says, unfortunately, in America, I didn't have any heritage passed down to me. Well, that's a shame. But of course, as an American, you've got heritage, and perhaps you just need to trace your family. And then Sam says, thank you for your knowledge. Let me know what would be truly Viking besides Thor's hammer. I will do. And Aaron Kelly says, I did. And Martin Brown says, no, I laid in England during the 1970s. So what that refers to. And then Sam Staples says, can't wait to share the story with my daughter. Well, please do. And all the stories, apart from a couple we told, are family friendly. There's a couple what I got able to tell with swearing, like the 3 pigs, and I told the 3 pigs with swearing, which was quite funny. It was kind of like a trial on the channel just to try what a folktale would be like with swearing in. But 99% of our videos are family friendly, because we're making for every age, whether you're 7 years old or 97 years old. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And then Offer 10 says, hello to Offer 10, shooting a new troll movie in Trondheim at the moment. Or are they? I did see the troll movie on Netflix, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was probably one of the best troll movies I've actually seen. And I watched it because Turkey was around at the moment, and he enjoyed it too. So that's great, they're making another troll movie, because they're such wonderful creatures and such wonderful aspect of folklore to them. I would not like to make a troll, but it does remind me of another story. If you like another story, let me know, and I'll tell you one more before I think about going to bed. And then Sam Stapleton had a friend from Russia that said their grandmother would put a frog in the milk to keep it from spawning. Don't know if there's any truth in that. Oh, but basically you wash the frog, which is relatively clean, and it will stop it from settling if you put a frog in it. But I don't know whether a frog would drown in some milk. And would you actually drink milk that's had a frog in it? But let's face it, some people in the world like to go around and lick frogs because of certain reasons, and toads. I just licked a toad and I'm off my face. Woo! Not done it myself, thankfully. I don't recommend going around looking for random toads and licking them. Some of them can be quite poisonous. And then Martin Brown says, I am a troll and I live in a hole. It's a very good song. Well, it is. And of course, another famous story is about the 3 billy goats gruff. So once upon a time, in the good old Viking days, over 1,000 years ago, There was a wonderful valley with two steep sides with grass, and in the valley lived three goats. There was, an older goat who had big horns, and there was a middle goat who had little horns, and a little baby goat. And all summer they've been munching away on lovely grass on this hillside. But it's got to the point where they've ate all the good grass, or the nice bits of things they can eat. And so, they all got together and said, "What are we going to do, lads?" And then the older troll said, "Well, why don't we go to the other valley?" And so it sent the youngest one off first. The younger of the three little goats said, I'm going to go off to that valley then. I'll test it out. And if it's any good, I'll give you a shout. And so, he walked off. Now, in the middle of this valley was an old river. And on this river was a stone bridge, a very rare thing back in the early times. And of course, we all know what live under bridges: trolls. So you always be careful when you cross a bridge, because you never know when you're going to encounter a troll. And so, the old biddy goat, the younger biddy goat of the two, the baby one, was, starting to walk across the bridge. And the troll underneath the bridge heard this, and he jumped up and landed on top of the bridge. He said, "Well, I'm going to eat you for my dinner." The goat, the baby goat, being smart, said, "Oh, you don't want to eat me, mister." He said, "I'm only young and I'm just skin and bones, mate. That's what I am." Looking my Viking weapons. And so the troll, being a bit stupid, thought, "All right." So in a little while, my older brother's coming across. Oh, he's a much bigger goat, got more meat and more flesh. Why don't you eat him? And the troll stroked his little chin. "All right, you can go and I'll eat your brother." And so, the little goat walked across the bridge and got to the other side of the valley, and all the grass was all new because it's not been eaten by the three goats. And he started munching away. And then, he made some kind of goat noises, and the other goats, his middle brother and his older brother, knew that it was safe. And so the older goat said, "Right, middle brother, you go over now, and I'll come in a bit." And so, the middle of the two goats started to walk down the valley, and again he came to the river and the old stone bridge. Cloppity-clop, cloppity-clop, over the bridge he went. But unknown to him, the big nasty troll with the big eyes and the big ears, big ugly teeth and a big ugly chin, heard him and jumped up and landed on the bridge and said, "Why, who's that crossing my bridge?" Because he thought it was his. And the middle goat said, "Oh, it's me. I'm the middle goat of the family." And he was another smart goat. And the troll said, "I'm going to eat you for my dinner." He said, "I love a bit of goat with his nice big fat belly." But the middle goat, he was very, very smart and said, "Well, you don't want to eat me, mate. You want to eat my older brother. Oh, he's ginormous for a goat. I mean, I'm all skin and bones, mate. You're going to get bones in your teeth and fat and flesh everywhere and skin, and you won't like me. So eat my older brother. He's much bigger than me, and he's got big muscles and a nice big fat belly of meat." Well, the troll rubbed his chin and thought, "Oh, okay then. You can cross the bridge." Cloppity-clop, cloppity-clop, across the bridge he went. And of course, the middle goat, got to the side of the valley with all the lovely green grass, all tall. And he saw his younger brother there. He thought, "Oh, great, let's all eat grass together." And started munching away. And again, they both made a loud goat noise, which I can't do. I could do a pig impression, I could do a parrot impression, I could do a monkey impression, but I can't do a goat impression. Don't know what a goat sounds like, to be honest. I'll have to research that. And try not to laugh now. And so, the old of the three goats heard the noises of the other two goats and thought, "Oh, that's a good sign. There must be some lovely grass over there." And so he started to walk down the valley. And again, he came to the bridge. Cloppity-clop, cloppity-clop, over the bridge he went. But the troll underneath the bridge heard him and thought, "Oh, this must be the big goat I can have for my dinner." And so, he stood on the bridge big this troll. So he pointed at the oldest of the 3 billy goats and said, I'm going to eat you for my dinner. Well, the older of the 3 billy goats looked at him and thought, oh, that's not going to happen, and quickly charged him with his horns and pierced his eyes of the big troll and blinded the troll. And the troll ran off scared because he'd been blinded by this old and wise goat. And of course, the goat crossed the old bridge, property clock, and found his 2 brothers munching away on grass. I wish I was a goat some days, but it sounded like a lovely life, apart from dealing with trolls. And had a lovely life. And the troll, who was now blind in both eyes, was never seen again. And no more did they have problems with the troll under the bridge. Which kind of reminds me of another story. Another story I'll tell you, called The 2 Farmers and the Stranger. And I love this tale. And I found this tale on a channel called David Heathfield, who tells wonderful folk tales. And he's much smaller than us when it comes to channel numbers. So many years ago, again, a lot of these stories go back, way back in history. Some of them could be even as old as the Iron Age. There lived 2 farmers, and they were both brothers. And again, they lived in a big valley. You had one farmer lived on one side of the valley, the older brother, and the younger brother, he lived on the other side. They weren't married, they had no children, no servants, they just lived on their own. But they farmed sheep. They had lots and lots of sheep. Both of them had sheep. And so, the 2 farmers lived on opposite sides of the valley in their little long houses. And each day they got up at sunrise and went out and took the sheep off to go and, graze in the field at the bottom of the valley. But one day, they was both down there, these 2 brothers. And the older brother says, you see that sheep in your flock? That's my sheep, that is. And the younger brother says, oh, no, it's not. That's my sheep. No, that's definitely my sheep. I know that sheep, said the older brother. I've had him for a long time. That is my sheep. And the younger brother says, no, it's not your sheep. It's my sheep. I tell you now, it's my sheep. I've had that sheep for a long time. His name's Dave. All right, Dave the sheep, his name. And, they had a big argument and they fell out. That's people do. People fall out over stupid things. And let's not forget, in the world, there's 2 wonderful things in the world. The first thing in the world is love, and the second wonderful thing in the world is kindness. If you don't have those 2 qualities in your life, you're dearly missing out something. But of course, these 2 brothers have fell out over this sheep, and they met in the bottom of the valley. The older brother says, where's that sheep of mine? Well, at this point in the story, the younger brother, he tied it up at home and wouldn't bring it down to the field in case his older brother tried to nick the sheep. And so, they both fell out and they never spoke again for many, many years. Many seasons passed, many summers and many winters. And then one day, a stranger wearing a large grey cloak and had a big white beard, you may know who he is, entered the valley. And the younger brother saw this stranger and said, hey up, my duck. That's what I say locally. What are you doing here? Oh, I said, I'm just passing through. He said, can you put me up for a few days? Could you lodge me in your longhouse? Well, the younger brother, being a bit mean, says, yeah, I'll let you stay in my house, but I want something from you. I said, well, what do you want? I don't have any coin. I've got no drink, no mead. I said, I want your labour. I said, I want you to go and chop down a load of wood in the trees in the forest over there. So I'll lend you a horse and cart and my favourite axe. I said, I want you to build a fence at the bottom of that valley. Because he never told him about falling out with his older brother. And so, the old stranger, the wise man, said, oh, I'll agree to this then. So the next morning, after they both went to bed, in the long house, and they got up. He went and got the horse and cart and started to go and chop down a load of wood, a load of trees. And he spent days and days making posts and making planks. You know, he had a lovely TK axe, which I got somewhere on the table, and he was, you know, making the planks he needed, and he was making posts. And you know, the young farmer, you know, the younger of the two brothers, I tell you what, when are you going to start making my fence? I said, when I've got enough wood and enough timber, I will make your fence. And so one night, everything was ready. It was all at the bottom of the valley. And so the old stranger says, I'm going to make your fence overnight because I've got to get moving soon to go somewhere else. And so, you know, well, I'll make your fence overnight when you'll never see that brother of yours. But by now, you've learnt the story about the two brothers falling out over the sheep. That's my sheep, that is. Oh, no, it's not. It's my sheep. All that for a bit of mutton. And so this stranger, the white beard, wearing an old grey cloak, spent all night hammering away. And the younger farmer, that's all he could hear all night, hammering away as he was hammering nails into wood. And the next morning, he was very excited to get up to go and see his fence. But when he got up and he walked down the bottom of the valley, there was no fence. There was a bridge. And the stranger was walking off. And he shouted out, "Oi, you! Come back! You made a bridge, not a fence." Well, he says, "I've done mending and making bridges here. I must move on." And that is the story from the folk tale, an old Christian story as well as a pagan story of the stranger and the two farmers. Now we have a comment here, quite interesting, from Susie Bag a Beer. It says, "Repent and believe in the gospel and his will, my friend." Well, first of all, Christians have stolen hell from the Vikings because it's a Viking thing. And secondly, it's not very Christian of you to come on a channel and to try to tell people to repent, because that's very right wing, and I don't like that really on the channel. And it doesn't matter what you believe in, whether you believe in the old gods or the new gods. The most important thing is that you practice goodness and kindness. So I do hope you learn from that little lesson. And it kind of reminds me of another story, one from Iceland. And the story is called Buala. It's a very old Icelandic story. And many years ago, as I drink some more beer, because I'm getting a bit dry in the old mouth, because I do love telling stories, but these live streams can take it out of you. Start with a man and a woman. Again, the man was old in age, in his 40s, which was very old back in those times. And they had one son. And they had one cow, a wonderful cow called Buala. Now, this cow was a lady cow, and she's not long given birth. And you know, both the old man and the woman and the son, he was just about to become a man. He was very excited over this. You know, they went to bed in a long house, in a wooden frame bed with straw, probably in a sack, with some nice wool blankets on top. And the very next morning, he went out to go and milk the cow, Buala. But something very strange had happened, for the cow was missing. They looked around everywhere. They looked in the outbuildings, they looked in the little valleys near them, in the woods. On no account could they find their cow, Buala. I mean, the old farmer shouted out, "Buala, Buala, where are you?" Well, they heard nothing, not even one moo. No, not one. And so the old farmer sat in his chair next to the hearth, the fireside, and got his son and said, "Now, son, this is the day when you become a man. and he gave him a pair of leather shoes, the first pair of shoes he's ever owned, and a pair of trousers, pants, or breeches in the old Viking tongue, and said, "You must go out, and you must go and look for Buala, because he is very special to us." And of course, in those times, a cow was worth about 600 coin pieces of silver, a lot of money, 2 years worth of earnings to the average farmer, the average man, or Saxon or Viking, whether he be Christian or whether he be pagan. And so, they gave him a little leather sack with some nice bread and cheese again. Oh, that's my favourite supper, that is, bread and cheese. I might have some later on, not from Canberra. He said, "You must go out, and you must go and hunt and look for Buala, a magical, wonderful cow." And so, the only son they've only got one child, agreed to do this. He was about 13 or 14 at the time. That's when you became a man in those times. When he was old enough to hold a axe in your hand and go into battle, that's when you became a man. And of course, the sign of him being given a pair of boots and a pair of trousers for the first time, because all he had was a tunic and no trousers, was also a sign of him becoming a man. He said, "I'll do this, father. I will go out and I will go and look for you, our wonderful cow, Buala." And in the meantime, his mum and dad looked after the baby calf, who was very stressed because mother's gone missing. And so the lad, who will remain nameless again, because a lot of folk tales don't give names to people, went out and he started walking across the plains of Iceland. And he spent a couple of days walking. One night he slept by a lone single tree and managed to get a fire going. And then he walked again a few more leagues, a few more miles or kilometres, until he found an old rock on the ground. And he sat down, he got his leather bag, got out his bread and cheese, and he had a cup. He got some nice water from a spring. And he had his cheese, or some of it, and some of the bread. And then he stood up and he said, "Buala, Buala, you must moo if you can hear me." And in the very faint distance, you could hear a moo. At that very point, he knew that moo was from Buala himself. And he knew what direction to go in. And again, after a couple of days of walking through this long and distant plain, he came to the edge of it. And again, there was a rock. He sat down, he had some more bread and cheese. He had his bread and cheese, it was quite full. That said, 2 days had passed. And again, he stood up. He went, "Buala, Buala, you must moo. Moo if you can hear me, Buala." And I'm sure in Icelandic and in other cultures it's pronounced slightly differently, but I pronounce it the way I speak in English. And again, in the distance, he heard a moo, moo. But this time it was louder. And again, he knew the direction to go in. And so he started walking up this large, large hill. And when I talk about large hill, it took him 2 days to get to the very top of it. And he found another rock, because Iceland is the land of ice and fire. It's full of rocks and stones and boulders the size of houses. And he found this rock to sit on. He had the rest of his bread and cheese, the last bit. And he stood up again and he says, "Buala, Buala, if you can hear me, you must moo." And again, the cow, Buala, mooed. "Moo," said the cow. "Moo." Well, at this point, he thought, well, that's a bit strange, because it's not coming from the distance, it's coming below me. And the lad, the young Viking, he looked down here as a big cliff. And again, he could hear the sound of the cow. "Moo, I'm over here, moo," in cow language. And he thought, whoa, I must climb down this cliff. So he spent all day very carefully climbing down a cliff. And what do you think, folks, he found at the very bottom of this cliff? Well, he found a very large cave. And we all know in folk tales, in folklore, what lives in caves. But in this time, in this case, it wasn't trolls, but it was something even worse than a troll, or it was a family of giants, 20 leagues high, as big as any mountain. And he thought, oh my, by the gods, he said, I'd never seen giants before. And you could hear them in the cave. They was all asleep and snoring. He thought, well, if I sneak in the cave, I might be able to find the cow Buala, and me and him could escape. And so this is what he did. He crept very slowly, very carefully, being careful where he stood, because there was bones everywhere of dead animals and some humans as well. Because let's face it, a giant loves to eat humans just like they eat, like eating cows. And at the edge of the cave were all these little chambers, and there was beds with all these giants asleep. And so, he kept on creeping in the cave. And in the middle of the cave was a large wooden post. In fact, it's the largest wooden post he's ever seen in his life. He thought, oh, by the gods, where did he get the wood from that from? He thought, it must be from Yggdrasil himself. But it wasn't, of course. It was just a very, very large log from a tree. And at the base of the tree was the cow, Buala, tied up. And so he crept over to the cow. He said, Buala, he said, you must be quiet and don't move, because you will wake up the giant. And let's face it, folks, the last thing you want to do when you're in a cave with giants is wake up the giant, because soon you'll be their dinner. You'll be put on a spit and roasted over a fire, and they'll have this young Viking for dinner. And so he was very careful. He crept in the cave. He got the leather cord around the neck of the cow, and he pulled it over the head. He said, you must come with me, come with me. And so the both, Buala and the young Viking lad, they crept out of the cave. Took them all day to do it. And then they climbed up the cliff for the rest of the evening and started to walk back home. But now the giants have woke up and have discovered that the cow they have stolen was missing. They thought, who's been taking our cow? He says, one of the giants. And he pointed to one of his giant wives and said, you must go out and fetch the cow back, because I was going to have him for my dinner. And I'm very, very hungry as a giant. And so this giant wife agreed to do this. Now, the young Viking at this point was in the valley with the cow Buala. And in the distance, they could hear a thumping noise. It was getting louder and louder and louder until he looked round. In the distance, he could see the giant that was running towards him. Now, something very magical happened at this very moment. The cow spoke and said, you must pull a hair from my tail and lay it on the ground. Well, the young Viking was a bit puzzled because he'd never heard a cow speak before. But he thought, well, if the cow can speak, perhaps there's some magic here. And so he did this. He plucked one long hair from the tail of the cow and he laid it on the ground. And the cow spoke some magical words and said, you must turn into a mighty big river. And very suddenly, where the hair on the ground was, a mighty river came out of the ground. And quite luckily for the Viking lad, and the cow was on the opposite side to the giant, and this massive river appeared. It was so big, so wide that no giant would dare cross it. And he thought, oh, I'm safe now. And in all these stories, things always happen in threes, because 3 is a magical number, like 7, and especially like the number 9. And so, the giant came up to the river, the giantess, the wife of the big giant, and looked at the river and thought, oh, I can't get over that. But this time, she turned round and she shouted for one of the servants, you must come and bring a bellows with you. And so a servant of the giant, another giant, came with a massive bellows, which you pump to blow, get your fire going. But this giant was very clever. She got the bellows and she pulled the bellows apart, and it sucked up the river in one giant go, and the river was dry. And the giant was able to cross the river. Now, our young Viking lad saw this with the cow and thought, oh, by the gods, look at that. They're going to come and eat us soon, Buala, we best get going. And then the cow, Buala, for the second time, spoke some magical words and said, you must pull a hair from my tail and lay it on the ground again. The lad, the young Viking, did not hesitate for a second. He got a long tail hair, lay it on the ground, and very suddenly it set alight, and there was a massive wall of fire so high that no giant could cross it. No giant could leap over this fire wall. Well, the giantess came to the wall and thought, well, what's going on here? What sort of magic is this? But then she remembered, because he already sent back the servant and said, you must bring the bellows of water. And the servant giant came with the big bellows. At this point, it was still full of water. And she squeezed it, and all the water came out, and it put the fire out. Well, our young little Viking, with his little trousers and his little brand new shoes, saw this with Buala and said, oh, by the gods, even by the spite of Christ, of the right Christ, because at that point, Iceland was being Christianized. And they said, well, what are we going to do, Buala? And in between them and their home was a large, large mountain. And thought, well, if we get over this mountain quick, we can soon escape the giant, because no giant could cross that mountain. And, this is what they did. They climbed over the mountain, and when the giantess came to the mountain, no matter how many times she tried to climb up it, because this young lad, he knew all the ways and all the paths and all the secret ways to get over it, but she did not. So she turned around again and shouted back home to the servant giant, you must bring my large auger, a large drill. And so the giant servant did this and brought forward a large drill and started to drill a massive hole through the mountain so she could climb through it and get to the home of the young Viking lad and get back the magical cow Buala, because they wanted to eat it for the dinner. If I was a giant, I think I'd like to eat a massive cow, but I'm not. I'm a human, and I do love a bit of beef and steak. And so, the old giant started to drill away with the auger, drilling and drilling a massive hole until the hole broke through the other side and she could see daylight. And she started to get in the hole and crawl through. But the hole was too small and she got stuck. And she died in the hole. And it is said to this day that this giant is still there in this mountain in Iceland, in the land of ice and fire, the land of the Vikings, those very brave men. And that is the magical story of Buala, the magical cow. And I do hope you like these folk tales. And I always find it amazing that I can still remember them. After so many years I've told them, and I can keep on telling stories. And I think at some point in the live stream, we're going to challenge Braggy to see how many actual stories I can tell you in one live stream, whether it goes on for 4 hours, 6 hours, or 8 hours. Until the point I can't remember anymore is the point when that live stream will end. And would you like to see that? Let's just go back to some of your comments. So, and I do love your comments, and I do thank you for replying. And I've only got 50% on this battery, so it will die at some point because my phone's rubbish. But I've got a new phone now; it's even better. So, and then Ali says it's not very Christian to force it on others. No, it's not. And you always get these right-wing Christians, and there's a very small minority of them, especially towards pagans, that come across and say, oh, you must repent. And I've not had it too bad as a pagan, but I'm also a Christian at the same time because I'm a shaman. So you just have, and when you have a go at somebody else's faith, what you're doing is having a go at your own faith, because you should never have a go at anybody with faith, because faith is a wonderful thing. whether you believe in the old gods or the new gods. But no, it's not very Christian. But there's lots of good Christians out there, just like there's lots of bad ones, and there's probably bad pagans out there, just like there's good pagans. But that's just the world we live in. And then Sam Stapleton says, whenever you try to make sure you have a good experienced person with you, that's the way. If you start going down the rabbit hole, it can help you and get you in a very intense, you lose all mobility. Well, yeah. And Sam Stapleton says, definitely not like mushrooms. Well, it's quite amazing within modern medicine how pharmaceutical psychedelic drugs are now generally helping people. And especially, say, if you've got some mental health problem, they're tending now to look at the fact that giving psychedelics on a one-off or two-off people with mental health problems can actually do more good than harm. And I'm definitely not going to talk about my experience with that sort of thing, not on camera. Maybe in some kind of a private live stream, I may do on Discord. And Sam Stapleton says, Christians are the most closed-minded people I've ever met. That follow the old God seem to be more open-minded, and like our friend on the channel, it's even more open to being respectful towards you. Well, yes, I mean, it doesn't really matter, as I said before, what you practice and what you preach, whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, or whether you worship the three-legged hairy dog of Mars. It doesn't matter what you worship, as long as you practice, as I say it again, and I do so many times on camera, if you practice goodness and kindness, and it shouldn't matter what you practice and who you worship. That is the most important aspect of faith, and some people have just lost that ability to see that. And I've got a very good friend of mine called Godfrey Mennel, and he comes from the Mennel family who came over with William the Conqueror in 1066 and got given the land where he lives still to this day, 1,000 years on nearly. And he is one of the most wonderful Christian people I've ever met, and he's such a loving and kind man. And you could definitely take an example from Godfrey Mennel. And the Mennel family is quite important and famous where I come from. It's one of the oldest families in the area. And then Sam says, Christians are leaving, come to friendly place for Vikings and still try to oppress us. Well, the thing is, it doesn't work, does it? And we never have that as pagans. We go around trying to convert people. We don't. It doesn't, it should be down to the individual. And Sam says, I'm sorry, it just makes me mad, which I can appreciate, but it's just the world we live in, and some people just can't help themselves. And as long as you show forgiveness, then you're always going to be better than that kind of a person. And, if you show your enemy love and kindness, then at least you've done the right thing in life and you can move on as a better person. But we try not to be too, controversial in this subject. We are what we are, but we represent everybody. It doesn't matter who you worship, you're all represented here. And in fact, it does remind me of a story of a giant called Opero. And I'll tell you another story in a minute, or I do disappear and go to bed. And this is a Christian-based story. And it's a wonderful, wonderful story. And it is the origin of something quite special. But you give me a minute and I'll tell you that story. So Sam Stapleton says, because I still have to provide for my family. Of course you do, and that's mostly very important. Then the Viking Martin Brown says, I see pink elephants after a few pints. Once or twice, laughs out loud. What kind of beer are you drinking to see pink elephants? I'd like some. And Sam says, when I did DMT, I actually saw the Rosengrid change my outlook of thinking of the whole life. I did it when the Native Americans in Arizona, and that is how they speak to their God. Well, that's fair enough, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing on their culture. And Aaron Kelly says, yeah. And Sam Stapleton says, yes, love the folk tales. And one of the reasons why we started this channel was to get a large database of traditional stories told in the traditional way, rather than have it being to a cartoon or some animation. We wanted to tell it to you like it was 1,000 years ago. And yes, you can tell I live in a modern house because we are modern people. I don't have a Viking longhouse yet, but and storytelling is such an old thing. But many, many years ago, there was a giant, and his name was Offero. In this story, he has a name, which is quite a rare thing. And Opera was a big giant, and he was a servant to a king. Perhaps he was a Viking king, and we don't know. And this king, was a very powerful man. He had lots of land and hundreds of warriors. And one day he was sitting around the table eating some food, and he was muttering to himself. He said, "Oh, I must go and find the devil. I must go and find the devil." You know, and I need to go and find this Satan. He says, "Therefore, he is the most powerful god of them all." And the giant said, "Well, who's this Satan you're about?" The king explained, "Well, Satan, the devil, is the most powerful god of all the gods, because this king, his heart had gone bad. He became a wicked man." Well, at this point, the giant, he couldn't serve him anymore. And he said, "I'm not going to serve you as a servant, not when there's a greater guy than you," because at that moment in time, he thought that his king was the most powerful person on the planet, on the whole Middle Earth. He said, "I'm leaving your service." And of course, the king could do nothing. He was a giant off-road. And despite how many hundreds of warriors he had, he could not force him to stay. And so, the giant Opera went off in search of Satan, the devil. And in folk tales of the devil never wins. This is a good thing. And so, this giant, he searched all over the lands for the devil, for Satan. He looked in the forests. He looked in the woods, on beaches. He looked in mountains and in caves, in valleys, in old halls and old abandoned towns, and everywhere he looked for Satan, and he could not find him. He thought, wow, if this king was so, admiring of Satan, he must be somewhere. And at this point, he was sitting on top of a mountain. And in the distance, he saw a large column of people marching and walking. He thought, well, what's all this about? And so, in a few big boundful leaps, he leapt down from the mountain until he got to the back of the column and said, "What? Where are you guys going then?" I said, we're following Satan, and we're going to go on many journeys with this devil god." I said, "At last, I've found Satan, the man he's been looking for, the god, the wicked god he's been looking for." Not that the giant was a wicked giant, he wasn't. He was a very kind and caring giant, a rare breed. And so he walked to the beginning of the column, and there in front of the column was Satan himself. He said, "Are you Satan?" He said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I've come to serve you because I've heard that you're the most powerful god of all of the gods." I said, "I am indeed. I'm devil, I'm the Satan, I can do what I want." And so for some time he joined the column, and he joined all of Satan's followers. And they was walking along this large valley until they came to a crossroads. But there's something rather strange about this crossroads, because in the middle was a large cross. And on the cross was the figure of the Schweiterkleister, or the White Christ, as the Vikings called him. And the devil shook in fear. "Oh, by the gods," he said, that's Jesus, that is." And the giant saw the devil and said, "Well, what's the matter?" He said, "I'm scared of that man. He scares me." Well, at that point, the giant knew that there was a much greater guy to go and worship. And so he went off again to go and look for Jesus Christ, the Schweiterkleister, the White Christ. He searched everywhere. He looked in the valleys. He looked on the hills and in caves, in towns and He looked in the mead halls. He looked in old ruins. He looked everywhere, from every mountain to every valley. But he could not find this Jesus Christ, this Viper Christ. He could not find this White Christ figure. He thought, well, I wish I could find him. It took me so long to find the devil. And I joined the devil with his companions and all of his followers. And now I found out the devil was scared of this Jesus Christ. I want to follow this guy because this guy sounds ultimately the most powerful man in the world. And that's the guy I want to worship and work for. He looked for days and weeks and months past. He could not find it. Many, many years passed. Until one day he came to an old cave. And in the cave was an old hermit with a big white beard and a grey cloak. And the giant said, I'm hungry. He said, could you get some food for me? I'm not eaten for days and I'm starving. Well, this old hermit, he was a wise man. He said, oh, yeah, I've got some food for you. And they both sat down around a fire, and the giant went and got some wood, and the hermit was very happy, and he fed the giant. And they got talking to each other, and they said, well, what are you doing then, lad? Said to the giant off the road. They said, oh, I used to serve this king. He became very wicked and started to worship Satan. I then went out on my journey to look for this man, this Satan figure. He had big horns on his head, and he was all red. But then one day when I was with the company of Satan, he got scared over a statue of the white Christ, of Jesus Christ. And he said, well, that's the man for me. If any Satan, any guy scared of him, he's the guy to serve. But I've looked for months and years and I can't find him. And well, the old hermit looked at him and said, well, you could search for the rest of your life. You won't find Jesus. He's got to find you, mate. He said, you see that valley down there, he says. I said, oh, yes, said the giant. Said, there's an old and nasty river down there, mate. I said, why don't you set yourself up and you can help people to cross the river? If you did that, you'd be serving Jesus and you'd be serving the right Christ, and he'll be very happy with you, because so many people cross that river and drown every year. So many people, it's unbelievable. And so the giant off the road said, oh, I'm going to do that because I'm fed up with searching. My feet are aching and I want to find somewhere to live. And so there's a tree down there, and he pulled this tree out of the ground and he ran his hand along it, and all the branches came off, and he made himself a massive giant walking stick. And with a load more wood, he made a nice little house for himself. And he set about helping people to cross the river. Some bloke, Irish, comes along, hey, mate, can you help me to cross? Oh, yeah, just jump on my back and I'll help you to cross. And for many, many years, he did this off the road, the giant. He searched, right, we're still live streaming because I can't see my camera and that one's dead. So he helped many, many people over many years, to cross the river. And then one day, he was sitting outside his little house and a baby appeared. He said, hey, up, mister, could you help me to cross the river? He looked at the baby and said, what are you doing here on your own? Oh, I said, I'm having a walk out. I got to cross the river to get to somewhere. And the giant opera said, all right, you jump on my back, little baby, and I'll help you across the river. It's a big, mighty river, it takes a few hours to get across it. It's that wide and very deep and very fast, the torrent. And so, the baby got on the back and the giant started to walk across the river. But something supernatural happened, something very strange. Because the further he walked across the river, the heavier the baby got. He said, well, what's going on here? He said, I could hardly move. The baby's so heavy. It took him all day to cross the river. The further he got across, the heavier the baby was. And he said, hey, mate, there's something a bit strange here, And then the baby turned around. When he got to the other side of the river, he put him down. He said, well, I'm not just any baby. I'm the Jesus Christ you've been looking for. And from now on, I'm going to call you Saint Christopher, because you help people on their journeys. And that is the origin story and the true origin story of Saint Christopher. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tale. So I hope you've enjoyed that one as well, to end the live stream. Because soon and now I must get my dinner, because Braggy is hungry, and I've got to give my voice a rest and get ready for work in the morning. Oh, yes. It's Friday tomorrow, so cheers. And I hope you've enjoyed this live stream. And don't forget, if you're new, then please subscribe. And I'm really rubbish at sharing my videos, so it's two things you can really do. Subscribe to the channel. If you're on Reddit or you're on X, just share our videos out. It will really, really help me and the channel to grow. And we can make the world a better place. And I do believe that. I do believe that as individuals, we can make the world a better place. Because let's face it, there's a lot of social engineering in the world, no matter what country you come from. And, you know, we need to make the world a better place so we can all live in peace. And we can take humanity to become, for the first time, a level 1 civilization. Go beyond the planet, go into the stars, a bit like Star Trek, and make the world a better place. I do believe that with all my heart. So until the next time we meet again, and you know, you can't beat a tea-axe, we can go clubbing. Well, I'll tell you some more stories, and I'll try to do a live stream, and maybe on Saturday if I'm not tired. And if you want me to talk, you know, specifically about something, perhaps I'll do a live stream about swords. I can show you all the swords I've got and fill this table with swords in my next live stream. And then in my next live stream at some point, I'm going to start reading you from the Viking sagas. I'm going to start with the origin stories from the Viking sagas. But as a reader, I'm going to make them my own stories. So I'm not actually reading the story out as it's written in the book. I will make it my own, because that will beat any copyright issue. And I think that will be also quite wonderful to have on the channel. So it's a goodbye from me. Don't forget to give it a like. Cheers, folks. And if you do like stories, then I do urge you to go and check out our playlist. We have told so many, from T.K. Thorkelson to Egil Thorson, and a couple of rare stories from Neil Sigmundson, and a few stories from Eirik Rickardson. I salute you all. Good health. What's hail in the Saxon tongue? Good health to you. Yes, thank you, thee. I thank you. That was a wonderful beer. I got a lot more wet and I don't fall over now. Oh, that's 2 hours and 22 minutes. Wonderful. Let's just I'll just look at some of your comments before I go. Do I have a horn cup? Well, where's my horn? Well, I've got different things. So you could have a if you're very poor, before I go, I'll talk about some drinking vessels. You could have a wooden bowl to drink from, or you could have the option of having a stave cup. This one leaks, so it needs to be repaired. You could have the option of having a drinking horn. No, that's a blowing horn, not a drinking horn, but you could have that as an option as well. And if I can find the other drinking horn, it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to T.K. I'll show you that, but it's where it is in my Viking room. I don't know. But perhaps we'll do a live stream on drinking vessels, and I'll get out some of my various drinking vessels. I don't have anything nice like in silver, but yeah. So I'm just going to read some of the comments I've not read before I do go. So there's some here. I'm just behind the camera because I can't see my other camera. So Aaron Kelly says, yeah. And Sam Stapleton, yeah, love the folk tales. And the Viking Martin Brown says, I better run. The dogs need food before I settle them for bed tonight. So good night, Martin. And Sam Stapleton says, good night, my friend. And we have a comment here from Bailey Lamb. Do you have a horn cup? So we'll try to do that in another live stream, and we'll talk about drinking vessels, because that's quite a fascinating subject. But yeah, I do have a horn cup, because they always have a wooden bottom on the bottom, and they always have wax inside. So yeah, I'll find all my drinking vessels, and we'll do a live stream on that, and perhaps we'll test a few of them. Aaron Kelly says, that was great. Well, just thank you for being there and watching and supporting the channel, because without you guys, we wouldn't have a channel. And as I always say in the videos, it's your channel as much as my channel, and we're here to spread the knowledge and have a good time. So Sam Stapleton, no real archaeological finds say the Vikings had horns on the helmets. Well, no, but there is a throwback to the Iron Age when they did have horns. And as Eggle would say, that perhaps during some of the religious practices, some of the helmets may have had horns because of that purpose. And that may be a throwback to a much earlier time. Because when you look at the Vendel helmets and you look at some of the plates with the two warriors, one of the warriors has horns on, a horned helmet on. But it's just a throwback to the Iron Age, really, I would say. But of course, it's we do have a video on the channel about horned helmets, where our former and late host Eggle Thorson, who's an archaeologist, went into detail about it. And Aaron Kelly says, "Thanks for the stream," and Upper 10 says, "Thanks, Braggy." If you don't know who I am Braggy Magnuson. And then Sam says, "Yeah, thank you. It was great." Well, thank you very much. And we'll see you in the next video tomorrow. We've got some cool videos out tomorrow, and I'll see what I can get edited. And we'll speak soon, guys. Love you to bits. And Cheat says, "Yeah, great stream. Well, it's only made great by you guys joining me in the live stream. And we've got such a wonderful Northworthy family." So, and Sam Stapleton says, "My bad, my dyslexia kicked in. I thought you said cap, not cup." What an interesting fact about Eggle Thorson was he was dyslexic, but yet he had a degree in archaeology. So never let it limit you, because, you know, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything. And I still can't find my Viking big drinking horn. It's around somewhere. By the gods, I don't know what I've done with it. So, see you later, guys.